Hey everybody, it's Emily at Art Schooling, and let's talk about why I love horror. So I recently read a book called Why I Love Horror, and it's a collection of essays by a variety of different authors, and each of them were talking about what got them into horror and why they still love it. And it made me start thinking, like, well, why do I love horror? What is it about horror that I enjoy so much? So let's discuss it, shall we? So my introduction to horror was when I was probably about like 6 years old. But before that, I was a very anxious and scared kid. Like my whole childhood, I spent most of my time anxious and scared about something. So, I was terrified of the Incredible Hulk when I was a small child. I was afraid of seeing my grandfather without his hat on. I was afraid of my uncle's bare chest because he didn't have a hairy chest, but my father did, and I thought there was something wrong with him and it was scaring me. I was afraid of elderly people. I was just afraid of so many things. And when I was about, I'd say 6 years old, I started sneaking out of my room at night and walking downstairs and creeping behind the couch to see what my father was watching on TV. And he sometimes would notice me and bring me over and let me sit on the couch with him. But there were many times where I was just lurking in the back of the room hiding. And I used to do that until I was 8 or 9. And I've watched so many things that I should probably not have seen, which I'm not going to say didn't contribute to me being such a scared kid. I used to be absolutely convinced that Freddy Krueger was going to get me in my sleep. And so I used to sleep in my brother's, my baby brother. I used to sleep on his floor because I don't know what I thought was he was not protecting me, but safety in numbers, I guess. And I did that up until I was probably about 8, and he woke up in the night and threw up on me because he was sick, and I decided that was more dangerous than Freddy. So I went back to my room. But we used to watch horror movies all the time when I was a kid. I remember just the idea of seeing something that I'm not supposed to made me so excited. I loved the idea of doing something dangerous while not actually doing anything dangerous. And I loved the idea that there were things out there that were way scarier than the stuff I was afraid of. So much scarier. And it wasn't real, but it felt real. You know what I mean? So I spent my childhood binging so many horror movies. I watched so much stuff. Most of it I couldn't even begin to tell you what movie that was, because I would just lurk. And I don't know what I was watching. And I would do the same thing at my grandparents' house. Whenever we stayed the night at my grandparents' house, I got to sleep on the fold-out couch in the den. And the den is where my grandpa sat up late at night watching TV and movies. And I would pretend to be asleep, and I would just be laying there with my eyes just slits while I was trying to see what was on the TV. And I would lay with my blanket up but peeking out so I could see what was on the TV. And used to watch Tales from the Crypt a lot. I watched some really bizarre horror movies that my grandpa was watching. So I saw so much stuff. And one of the things that I think I wouldn't say it cured my anxiety because I am still anxious, but one of the things that I think horror does for me, and one of the reasons that I love it, is that it really puts things into perspective. Because when you have a lot of anxiety, you know a lot of it is irrational. I have a lot of irrational fears. I used to be afraid of old people. I was afraid of elderly people. And I don't know why. I couldn't explain it exactly. Besides that we went to a nursing home to visit my great-grandfather once when I was probably 5 or 6, and the people there freaked me out. for whatever reason. And I became like convinced that old people were like the scariest thing. But like a lot of my fears, even as a kid, were irrational. And having an outlet like horror where I could watch a movie about a bunch of people getting killed by a crazed maniac, or a house that was haunted with ghosts, or, you know, vampires, things that were clearly not real, it made it feel like my fears were not anywhere near as scary as that. And that made me feel braver. And so I would start like seeking out more and more horror. And like, I remember being obsessed with finding the scariest book when I was a kid. And I read a lot of, I skipped right over Goosebumps. I think I read some R.L. Stine, and then I went straight to Christopher Pike. Read almost everything I could get my hands. I don't even know. I've read a lot of Christopher Pike, everything they had at my library. And when I got through all of that and I felt like I needed more things, my mom used to read John Saul, and so she had a couple of his books laying around the house, and I would pick those up and I would read those. And this was when I was like 9, 10, 11 years old, just starting middle school, and I read everything John Saul had written at that point. I read everything I could find by Christopher Pike, and so then I started going, okay, what else is there? And I discovered Stephen King. And I read all of his things. And oh, his books were just magical to me, because I think I felt like they were real horror. Like, he had a way of like taking everything and making it scarier than it really was. And I loved that. And so I read a lot of Stephen King when I was like in middle school. And that's also when I read The Exorcist, which I think to this day is still the scariest thing I've ever read. And I thought it was just like the craziest thing I could have ever had in my possession. Like, I got it at a yard sale, which is probably like the scariest way to acquire a book like that, because I don't know who had it before I did, but I bought it used at a yard sale. It was missing the cover. It was just this like horrible, sad piece of literature, but it was disturbing, and it was the scariest thing I'd ever read. And like, I became convinced that demon possession was real, and to this day, that is the one kind of horror that I won't watch, because it makes me so deeply uncomfortable. And I don't believe in any of that anymore. Like, I don't believe in demons. I don't believe in any of that. But for whatever reason, that makes me so uncomfortable. And I'm going to attribute it to reading The Exorcist when I was like 13 years old, 12 or 13, somewhere in there. I was in middle school, because I distinctly remember bringing that book to school with me and showing like the most upsetting passages to my friends and being like, let me read this to you. And like, oh my God, it was so gross and weird and disturbing. And I'm sorry to any of the kids at school that I read that to, who maybe weren't ready to hear that. But it made me feel a lot better about so many things. I think for me, horror is a kind of therapy. It's a way to deal with my own demons, but also a way to let myself know that no matter what's happening in the world, it could always be worse. Like, and I don't know, that's weirdly comforting, because everything's terrible right now. Everything's awful. And I keep seeing people say that they're starting to read more cozy books. They want like rom-coms. They want books that have happy endings. And I'm over here like, I need all of the worst thing. Like, I want to read some really dark, messed up books. I want to read something terrible. I want to read something full of like awful things happening. And for me, that makes me feel better, because nothing's that bad yet. Like, whatever's happening in the real world, it's still not like Pennywise murdering people, murdering children in Derry. It's still not like living in a house that is haunted or possessed. It's not that bad. I'm not being stalked and the final girl in a group of people who are getting murdered by some mysterious creature person. Like, there's always something worse. And I just find that incredibly comforting. And I love that horror is an outlet for me to like experience something that is so visceral or so traumatic in a safe way, because then I feel like I'm ready. I am prepared if something bad were to happen, because I've experienced that before. Whether it's buying a new home and finding out that something weird is going on, and like I know what to look for. If I ever buy a new house and I start noticing, like I see those red flags, I don't want that house. Like I know what those red flags are now. I am prepared. You know, and that's, like I said, that's weirdly comforting. So I love horror because it gives me a way to experience the worst things possible and then go, at least my life isn't that bad. So I would love to know what it is about horror that you love. What makes you love horror? And if you want to know about why other people love horror, I would highly recommend checking out Why I Love Horror, because it is such a great collection and it's such a perfect book to just pick up and read or listen to. I listen to the audiobook and it's perfect for October. It's a perfect way to like get yourself hyped about more spooky things and spooky season. So thanks so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Happy reading. Bye.